Olivia Bennett had never been one to back down from a challenge. At 24, she stood just 5'2", with delicate hands that most people associated with piano playing rather than warfare. But those same hands would eventually control both a light machine gun and a sniper rifle, with a precision that would change military doctrine forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The military transport plane touched down at Fort Benning, Georgia, with a jolt that sent Olivia's stomach lurching. As a recent graduate of West Point with honors, she should have felt confident stepping onto the tarmac for Advanced Infantry Training. Instead, she felt the weight of every doubting glance as she joined the group of soldiers heading toward the processing center. Is she lost? Olivia heard someone mutter behind her. Special Forces qualification isn't exactly a summer camp for girls with dainty fingers. Olivia kept her eyes forward, jaw clenched tight enough to crack walnuts. She'd heard variations of these comments throughout her military career, at West Point, during basic training, and now here at the Army's most elite combat school. She was used to being underestimated. In fact, she was counting on it. The Georgia humidity pressed against her skin like a wet blanket as First Sergeant Michael Donovan stepped forward to address the new arrivals. Donovan was a legend in Special Forces circles, a 25-year combat veteran with 3 Silver Stars and a reputation for producing the most lethal soldiers in the U.S. military. His eyes scanned the formation, pausing momentarily on Olivia. "Welcome to Hell Week, ladies and gentlemen." Donovan's voice carried across the assembly area without him raising it. "Look to your left. Look to your right. 2/3 of you won't be here by Friday. Some of you don't belong here already." His gaze lingered on Olivia just long enough to make his meaning clear. She stared straight ahead, refusing to flinch. Special Forces qualification requires strength, endurance, and technical proficiency with every weapons system in our arsenal, Donovan continued. This isn't about meeting minimum standards. This is about excellence under the most extreme pressure imaginable. Olivia had graduated 3rd in her class at West Point. She had mastered military strategy, excelled in tactical planning, and set records in marksmanship competitions. But none of that mattered here. Not yet. After processing, the candidates were divided into training squads. Olivia found herself assigned to Alpha Squad under Donovan's direct supervision. The 11 men in her squad ranged from hulking former football players to lean marathon runners, but all shared one common trait. They were at least half a foot taller than Olivia with hands that dwarfed hers. "Bennett," Donovan approached as the squad prepared their gear for the first day of training. "What's your story? You look like you accidentally wandered into the wrong program." "No accident, First Sergeant," Olivia replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Donovan's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that. These weapon systems require strength and dexterity that some people simply don't possess. This isn't about equality or inclusion. It's about combat effectiveness." "Understood, First Sergeant." Donovan moved away, but Olivia caught the skeptical glances exchanged between her squad mates. She had seen this before. The assumption that her size, her gender, her hands, meant she couldn't possibly handle the physical demands of elite combat training. What they didn't know was that Olivia came from 3 generations of military service. Her grandfather had been a Marine Corps sniper in Vietnam. Her mother had been one of the first female combat helicopter pilots in Desert Storm. And her father had been a weapons specialist who'd taught Olivia to field strip an M4 before she could ride a bicycle. But it was her hands that had brought her here. Hands that everyone assumed were a limitation, but that Olivia knew were her greatest asset. The first day of training began before dawn. The candidates assembled on the firing range as the first hint of sunlight crept across the Georgia pines. Master Sergeant William Harper, the lead weapons instructor, stood before a table laden with disassembled firearms. "Today we evaluate your basic weapons proficiency," Harper announced. "You will field strip, reassemble, and demonstrate proper handling of standard-issue sidearms and rifles. Speed and accuracy both matter." Olivia stepped forward with her squad when called. The first test was simple: disassemble and reassemble an M9 Beretta pistol. Her small fingers moved with practiced precision, completing the task in 47 seconds, 10 seconds faster than anyone else in her squad. Harper's eyebrows lifted slightly, but he said nothing as they moved to the M4 carbine. Again, Olivia's hands worked with mechanical efficiency, her movements economical and precise. She finished first again. It wasn't until they reached the M249 light machine gun that the challenges became apparent. The M249, commonly known as the SAW squad automatic weapon, weighed 22 pounds unloaded and required significant upper body strength to operate effectively in combat conditions. "Bennett," Donovan appeared at her shoulder. "Think you can handle this one with those little hands of yours?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Several of her squad mates chuckled. Olivia ignored them, focusing instead on the weapon before her. "Yes, First Sergeant." Olivia approached the disassembled M249, studying the parts arranged on the table. She had practiced this countless times on her own, preparing for exactly this moment. Her father had taught her to use leverage instead of brute strength, precision instead of power. Her fingers moved with deliberate grace, finding pressure points and angles that made the heavy components more manageable. She completed the assembly in just under 2 minutes. Not the fastest time, but respectable. "Now for the real test," Harper announced. Live fire qualification. The firing range stretched out before them, targets positioned at varying distances. Each candidate would be evaluated on accuracy, with multiple weapon systems. Olivia stepped up to the firing line when her name was called. The M4 carbine felt familiar in her hands, an extension of herself rather than a separate object. She emptied her magazine with methodical precision, placing each round within the center mass of the target. "Not bad, Bennett," Harper acknowledged. "Let's see how you do with something a bit heavier." The M249 was next. Olivia braced herself, adjusting her stance to accommodate the weapon's weight and recoil. Several of her squad mates watched with barely concealed skepticism as she positioned the bipod and prepared to fire. "Those tiny hands won't be able to control that beast," someone muttered just loud enough for her to hear. Olivia took a deep breath and squeezed the trigger. The M249 roared to life, sending a stream of 5.56mm rounds downrange. What her observers failed to understand was that Olivia's smaller hands actually gave her better trigger control and finger dexterity. She made minute adjustments that others couldn't, keeping the weapon on target despite its tendency to climb during sustained fire. When she finished, even Donovan looked surprised at the tight grouping on her target. "Beginner's luck," he said, but there was a note of uncertainty in his voice that hadn't been there before. The day continued with classroom instruction on advanced weapon systems, including the Foyce 338 Lapua Magnum, a long-range precision rifle used by military snipers for engagements beyond 1,500 meters. The rifle was massive, designed for larger-frame shooters with the strength to manage its substantial recoil. "Tomorrow we'll begin familiarization with specialized weapons," Harper informed them as the day drew to a close, "including the Lapua. I suggest you all get some rest. You're going to need it." In the barracks that evening, Olivia sat alone on her bunk, studying the technical manual for the Challenger 338 Lapua, while the men in her squad exchanged war stories and predictions about who would wash out first. "Hey, Bennett," called James Ramirez, a former Marine who transferred to the Army specifically for this program. "No hard feelings when you wash out, right? Not everyone is built for this kind of work." Olivia didn't look up from her manual. "No hard feelings when I outshoot you tomorrow either, Ramirez." The barracks fell silent for a moment before erupting in laughter. "Big talk from little hands," Ramirez replied. "But I guess we'll see tomorrow, won't we?" "I guess we will," Olivia said, turning a page in her manual. That night, after lights out, Olivia lay awake, thinking about what lay ahead. She had spent years preparing for this opportunity, practicing weapons handling until her fingers bled, strengthening her arms and shoulders to manage recoil, studying ballistics and wind patterns and bullet trajectories. Everyone thought her small stature and delicate hands were disadvantages. They couldn't see that in the world of precision shooting and weapons manipulation, bigger wasn't always better. What mattered was control, finesse, and a deep understanding of physics and mechanics. The next morning came too quickly. Olivia's muscles ached from the previous day's exertions, but she ignored the discomfort as she joined her squad for the march to the advanced weapons range. The 338 Lapua rifles were laid out on shooting benches, gleaming in the early morning sun. Each one cost more than what most of the candidates earned in 3 months. They were precision instruments, capable of hitting targets at distances that seemed impossible to the untrained eye. "Today we determine who has the potential for specialized weapons training," Donovan announced. "The Lapua is not forgiving. It will punish every mistake, every tremor, every miscalculation." Olivia waited patiently as her squadmates took their turns behind the massive rifle. Some performed admirably, placing rounds within acceptable parameters at 800 meters. Others struggled with the weapon's substantial recoil and exacting requirements. When her turn came, Olivia approached the shooting bench with quiet confidence. She made minute adjustments to the stock and bipod, setting up the rifle to accommodate her smaller frame. "Need a booster seat, Bennett?" Ramirez called from behind her. Olivia ignored him, focusing instead on the distant target. She calculated the wind drift, the bullet drop, the minute adjustments needed to place her round exactly where she wanted it. Her first shot felt perfect the moment she squeezed the trigger. The rifle slammed into her shoulder with brutal force, but she had anticipated it, absorbed it, controlled it. Through the scope, she watched as her round struck the target dead center. "Lucky shot," Donovan said, but he was watching her more carefully now. Olivia fired again. And again. 5 shots, 5 perfect hits, each one touching the previous impact point to create a single ragged hole in the center of the target. "The range fell silent, Bennett," Harper said quietly. "Have you fired this weapon system before?" "No, Master Sergeant," Olivia replied truthfully. "But my father was a weapons specialist. I grew up learning about ballistics and trajectories." Harper nodded slowly. "Well, it shows. That's the best group I've seen from a first-time shooter." For the first time since arriving at Fort Benning, Olivia allowed herself a small smile. It was a beginning, but only that. She hadn't come here to impress people with one good shooting performance. She had come to revolutionize how the military thought about weapons specialists. The training intensified over the next 2 weeks. Each day brought new challenges, new weapon systems, new opportunities for failure. Olivia excelled with precision rifles and showed surprising proficiency with the M249, but struggled with heavier weapons, like the M240 machine gun, which pushed the limits of her physical strength. Donovan continued to push her harder than the others, finding fault with everything from her stance to her equipment maintenance. After a particularly grueling day on the range, he cornered her during the evening weapons cleaning session. "You're good with the rifles, Bennett, I'll give you that," he said, his voice low enough that the others couldn't hear. "But being a Special Forces weapons sergeant isn't about being good at one thing. It's about mastery of all systems in all conditions." "I understand, First Sergeant." "Do you?" "Because tomorrow's exercise will require you to demonstrate proficiency with multiple weapons under stress. Many candidates with twice your strength have failed." Olivia met his gaze steadily. "I'll be ready." "We'll see." As Donovan walked away, Ramirez approached, his expression more thoughtful than hostile for once. "He's not wrong, you know," Ramirez said, sitting down beside her. "Tomorrow's exercise is brutal. They're going to make you run the gauntlet with full combat load, then expect you to operate heavy weapons with precision." "Thanks for the warning," Olivia replied, continuing to clean her assigned rifle. "It's not a warning, it's advice. There's no shame in recognizing physical limitations. I've seen bigger, stronger soldiers than you wash out because they couldn't admit when something was beyond them." Olivia's hands stilled. "Is that what you think this is? Me not recognizing my limitations?" Ramirez shrugged. "I think you're trying to prove something that doesn't need proving. Not everyone is built for every role. That's why we have teams." "And if everyone thought that way, we'd never advance," Olivia countered. "Every breakthrough in military history came from someone doing what conventional wisdom said couldn't be done." "Fair enough," Ramirez conceded. "But don't break yourself trying to break barriers." That night, Olivia modified her equipment, making subtle adjustments that would distribute weight more efficiently and give her better leverage with the heavier weapons. She studied the course layout, identifying places where technique could compensate for raw strength. By the time lights out was called, she had a plan. Morning brought clear skies and brutal humidity. The training cadre had set up what they called the Crucible, a combat simulation course that would test each candidate's ability to move and fight under extreme conditions. "Listen up," Donovan addressed the assembled candidates. "Today's exercise simulates a worst-case scenario. You will navigate the course with full combat load, engage multiple targets with different weapon systems, and be evaluated on both speed and accuracy. This is pass-fail, people. Wash out here, and you're done." Olivia checked her gear one last time. She had shaved every unnecessary ounce, adjusted her load-bearing equipment to sit higher on her torso, and practiced her transitions between weapons until they were seamless. Ramirez was first on the course. He performed admirably, moving with surprising agility for his size, and managing the weapons transitions with practiced ease. He finished the course 3 minutes under the maximum allowed time, earning a grudging nod of approval from Donovan. 2 more candidates completed the course successfully before it was Olivia's turn. She stepped up to the starting line, her heart pounding but her mind clear. "Begin!" Harper called. Olivia exploded into motion, navigating the first obstacle, a series of walls and tunnels designed to simulate urban combat, with an agility that her larger counterparts couldn't match. Her smaller frame allowed her to slip through spaces that would have forced others to find alternate routes. She reached the first firing position in record time, dropping into a prone position behind an M4 carbine staged on the ground. 5 targets appeared downrange, and Olivia engaged each one with mechanical precision before moving to the next station. The M249 was waiting at the second position. Olivia had known this would be her greatest challenge, managing the light machine gun's weight while maintaining accuracy after physical exertion. She had practiced a modified shooting stance that used her lower body for stability, compensating for her lesser upper body strength. The saw roared to life in her hands, sending a hail of rounds downrange as pop-up targets appeared and disappeared in rapid succession. Olivia's modified technique worked perfectly. She maintained control of the weapon while achieving a hit rate that matched the best performances of the day. As she moved to the final station, she could feel Donovan watching her intently. This was the moment of truth. The 338 Lapua awaited, requiring precise shots at extreme ranges after physical exhaustion had set in. Olivia settled behind the rifle, controlling her breathing despite her racing heart. The targets were positioned at varying distances, from 700 to 1,200 meters. Even experienced snipers would find this challenging after running the gauntlet. Her first shot struck true, as did her second and third. By her fourth shot, whispers had begun among the observing cadre. Her final shot, at the maximum range of 1,200 meters, accounted for wind, elevation, and the Coriolis effect with a precision that left even Harper speechless. Olivia completed the course with the second-best time of the day and the highest accuracy score across all weapon systems. As she crossed the finish line, even Ramirez looked impressed. "How the hell did you manage the saw like that?" he asked as she caught her breath. "It's not about strength," Olivia explained between deep breaths. "It's about leverage and body mechanics. My father taught me that." Donovan approached, his expression unreadable. "Bennett, a word." Olivia followed him away from the group, preparing herself for whatever criticism he had prepared. "That was—" Donovan paused, seeming to search for the right words. "Unexpected." "Thank you, First Sergeant." "It wasn't a compliment," he clarified. "It was an observation. You've clearly developed techniques to compensate for your physical limitations. But in real combat conditions, those techniques might not be enough." Olivia stood her ground. "With respect, First Sergeant, adaptability is what makes American soldiers the best in the world. Finding new ways to accomplish the mission isn't a workaround. It's innovation." For the first time, something like respect flickered across Donovan's face. "Maybe. But innovation only matters if it works when bullets are flying. The final phase of qualification will determine that." As Olivia rejoined her squad, she sensed a subtle shift in how they regarded her. The open skepticism had been replaced by cautious curiosity. She had proven she belonged here, but the greatest test was yet to come. The rumors started that evening. Whispers about the final qualification exercise being something never before attempted, a test designed specifically to push the boundaries of conventional weapons doctrine. "Word is they're going to make us operate multiple weapon systems simultaneously," Ramirez told her as they cleaned their assigned weapons. "Some kind of experimental tactical approach." Olivia's pulse quickened. If true, this played directly to her strengths, the dexterity and coordination that her smaller hands provided. "Simultaneously? How would that even work?" she asked. Ramirez shrugged. "No idea. But Harper was meeting with some guys from DARPA yesterday. Rumor is they're looking for operators who can pioneer new combat methodologies." DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, was responsible for developing emerging technologies for military use. If they were involved, this was bigger than a simple qualification exercise. Olivia lay awake that night, her mind racing with possibilities. Everything she had worked for, every technique she had developed to turn her supposed limitations into advantages, had led to this moment. Tomorrow would either vindicate her approach or prove her critics right. Morning formation brought confirmation of the rumors. Donovan stood before them alongside Harper and two civilians in polo shirts who screamed, "Government contractor," from a mile away. "Today's exercise is experimental," Donovan announced without preamble. DARPA has been developing concepts for increasing individual operator firepower in specialized combat scenarios. You will be the first to attempt implementation of these concepts. One of the civilians stepped forward. Dr. Alex Reynolds, DARPA Tactical Systems Division. "We've been exploring ways to maximize the effectiveness of specialized operators in situations where traditional fireteam structures aren't viable. Today's exercise will evaluate the feasibility of simultaneous operation of complementary weapon systems." The candidates exchanged confused glances. Even Ramirez looked skeptical. Reynolds continued, "You will be required to operate both a suppressive fire system, in this case the M249, and a precision system, the 338 Lapua, in a coordinated fashion to engage multiple target types simultaneously." Olivia's heart raced. This was it, the perfect application for her unique capabilities. "This isn't some theoretical exercise," Donovan added. "This is a legitimate tactical approach being considered for real-world implementation, but it requires operators with exceptional dexterity, coordination, and weapons mastery." The training area had been reconfigured overnight. An elevated shooting platform now overlooked a complex target array featuring both area targets for suppressive fire and precision targets at extreme ranges. "Candidates will have 15 minutes to familiarize themselves with the setup," Harper explained. "Then we begin evaluation." Olivia approached the platform, studying the arrangement carefully. The M249 was mounted on an adjustable bipod to her right, while the 338 Lapua was positioned on her left. Both were angled to cover overlapping fields of fire. The concept became clear. The operator would manage the SA with their right hand and arm, using it to suppress area targets, while simultaneously employing the Lapua with their left hand for precision elimination of high-value targets. It was insane. It was revolutionary. It was perfect for someone with Olivia's unique combination of skills. As the other candidates examined the setup, their doubts were evident. Even Ramirez, who had begun to respect Olivia's abilities, looked skeptical. "This is physically impossible," he muttered. "No one can accurately operate two completely different weapon systems with different ballistic properties simultaneously." "Maybe not with conventional techniques," Olivia replied quietly. When the familiarization period ended, Donovan called for the first volunteer. No one stepped forward. "Fine," he said. "Ramirez, you're up." Ramirez approached the platform with visible reluctance. He positioned himself behind the weapons, attempting to find a stance that would allow him to manage both simultaneously. His attempt was admirable but ultimately unsuccessful. While he could operate the saw effectively with his right hand and arm, his precision with the Lapua suffered dramatically. After 3 minutes of struggling, Donovan called a halt. "Next!" One by one, the candidates attempted the exercise. Some fared better than others, but none managed to demonstrate effective simultaneous operation of both systems. When only Olivia remained, a heavy silence hung over the training area. Everyone expected failure, everyone except Olivia herself. "Bennett," Donovan called. "You're up." Olivia approached the platform with calm determination. She studied the arrangement one last time, then made several adjustments, repositioning the Lapua slightly, adjusting the height of the SAW's bipod, modifying the angle of both weapons. "What are you doing, Bennett?" Harper asked. "Optimizing the setup, Master Sergeant. The current configuration is designed for operators with longer arms and larger hands." Ramirez exchanged glances with another candidate. They clearly thought she was stalling. When Olivia finally took position behind the weapons, she didn't immediately engage the targets. Instead, she took a moment to center herself, to feel the relationship between the two weapons in her body. Then she began. What happened next would later be described in DARPA reports as a paradigm shift in individual operator capabilities. Olivia's right hand and arm managed the M249 with controlled bursts, suppressing area targets with ruthless efficiency. Simultaneously, her left hand operated the Lapua, placing precision shots on distant targets with accuracy that seemed impossible under the circumstances. Her smaller hands, far from being a limitation, allowed for more precise trigger control on both weapons. Her modified stance, developed through years of compensating for her size, provided the stability needed to manage the different recoil patterns. For 5 full minutes, Olivia demonstrated mastery of the experimental technique, engaging multiple target types across varying distances without missing a beat. When she finally ceased fire, the silence was absolute. Dr. Reynolds was the first to speak. "That," he said quietly, "was exactly what we've been looking for." Donovan's expression had transformed from skepticism to something approaching wonder. Harper was already reviewing the target data on a tablet, shaking his head in disbelief. 97% hit rate on area targets, 100% on precision targets, Harper announced. "That's unprecedented." Olivia stepped down from the platform, her arms burning from the exertion but her mind clear and focused. Ramirez was the first to approach her. "How the hell did you do that?" he asked, genuine curiosity replacing his earlier dismissiveness. "My hands," Olivia replied simply. Everyone thought they were a disadvantage. They never considered they might be exactly what was needed for something new. As the candidates were dismissed for the day, Donovan pulled Olivia aside. "Bennett," he said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued, "I owe you an apology." "No, First Sergeant, you don't," Olivia replied. "You pushed me because you didn't think I belonged here. You were right to question whether I could handle the physical demands." "Maybe," Donovan conceded. "But I was wrong about what makes an effective operator. I was looking for the same attributes we've always valued, when I should have been looking for someone who could do what no one else can do." That evening, Dr. Reynolds requested a private meeting with Olivia to discuss what he called the future of special operations capability development. The experimental technique she had demonstrated, now unofficially dubbed the Bennett method, had implications that extended far beyond the training exercise. "What you did today wasn't just impressive, Lieutenant Bennett," Reynolds explained. "It was revolutionary. We've been theorizing about simultaneous weapons operation for years, but until now, no one has been able to demonstrate practical implementation." "It's all about understanding the mechanics," Olivia replied. "The weapons are tools. What matters is how you use them." "Exactly," Reynolds agreed enthusiastically. "And your physical attributes, the very things that others saw as limitations, are actually optimal for this application. Your smaller hands allow for more precise individual finger control. Your lower center of gravity provides better stability for managing different recoil patterns." For the first time in her military career, Olivia felt truly seen, not as a woman trying to keep up in a man's world, not as someone overcoming limitations, but as a soldier whose unique characteristics made her exceptionally suited for a specialized role that no one else could fill. The next morning, Donovan addressed the remaining candidates with uncharacteristic solemnity. "Yesterday, you witnessed something that will likely change Special Operations doctrine moving forward," he began. Lieutenant Bennett demonstrated capabilities that DARPA has been pursuing for years without success. She did this not in spite of her physical characteristics, but because of them. Olivia stood at attention, her face betraying none of the pride she felt at his words. "The lesson here isn't about gender or size," Donovan continued. "It's about recognizing that different missions require different operators with different abilities." The future of warfare won't be won by who has the biggest muscles or the most conventional skills. It will be won by those who can adapt, innovate, and perform tasks that the enemy believes impossible. As qualification week concluded, Olivia Bennett found herself in an unprecedented position. Not only had she successfully completed one of the military's most physically demanding training programs, but she had pioneered a technique that would bear her name in special operations circles for years to come. The small hands that had once drawn mockery had become her greatest asset, the key to unlocking capabilities that would change how the military approached certain high-risk operations where both suppressive fire and precision elimination were required simultaneously. More importantly, she had changed how Donovan and the other instructors evaluated candidates. Physical attributes that had once been seen as disqualifying were now being considered in terms of their potential advantages for specialized applications. On graduation day, as Olivia stood at attention with the other successful candidates, Donovan approached with something rarely seen on his face, a genuine smile. "Lieutenant Bennett," he said, extending his hand, "congratulations on changing my mind. In 25 years of training special operators, that's something no one else has managed to do." Olivia shook his hand, her small fingers engulfed by his massive palm. "Thank you, First Sergeant, for pushing me beyond what I thought possible." "That's the thing about assumptions," Donovan replied. "They limit both the people making them and the people they're made about. You've helped us break free of some very old assumptions about what makes an effective operator." As Olivia prepared to return to her unit, now designated for specialized deployment training, she found Ramirez waiting by the transport vehicles. "So," he said with a grin, "I guess size doesn't matter after all." Olivia laughed. "On the contrary, it matters a great deal, just not in the way everyone thought." "Fair enough," Ramirez conceded. "Just promise me one thing, Bennett. When they name this new combat technique after you, make sure they get the story right. Make sure they remember that everyone, including me, thought it was impossible until you proved us wrong." "It's not about proving people wrong," Olivia replied. "It's about expanding what's possible. There's a difference." As her transport departed Fort Benning, Olivia looked down at her hands, the hands that everyone had mocked, that she herself had sometimes doubted, that had ultimately proven to be perfectly designed for a purpose no one had imagined. Sometimes, she reflected, our greatest strengths hide in what others perceive as weaknesses. Sometimes, the very things that make us different are exactly what make us exceptional. And sometimes, it takes small hands to make the biggest impact. 3 months after her groundbreaking demonstration at Fort Benning, Lieutenant Olivia Bennett found herself in an unmarked building at the edge of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The room was filled with senior officers and civilian specialists, all focused on a video playing on the wall-mounted screen, footage of Olivia operating both the M249 and the 338 Lapua simultaneously. "As you can see," Dr. Reynolds was explaining to the assembled group, "Lieutenant Bennett's technique represents a fundamental advancement in individual operator capabilities. What we originally conceived as a theoretical concept has been proven not just possible, but remarkably effective." Olivia sat quietly at the back of the room, uncomfortable with being the center of attention but proud of what she had accomplished. In the 3 months since Fort Benning, her life had changed dramatically. Instead of deploying with a conventional unit, she had been assigned to DARPA's Special Capabilities Development Group, a small team of exceptional operators, tasked with pioneering new combat methodologies. Colonel Richard Hayes, the group's commander, paused the video on a frame showing Olivia's hands positioning both weapons. "The implications for special operations are significant," Hayes said, addressing the room. "Particularly for scenarios where we need both area suppression and precision elimination capabilities but can only insert a minimal footprint." A Marine Corps general in the front row looked skeptical. "It's impressive, certainly. But is it replicable? Or did we just get lucky with Lieutenant Bennett?" Hayes nodded toward Dr. Reynolds, who advanced the presentation to a new slide. "That's the fascinating part, General," Reynolds replied. "After analyzing Lieutenant Bennett's technique, we've identified specific physical attributes that optimize performance for dual-system operation. It turns out that what we traditionally considered ideal for combat operators, larger frames, greater raw strength, are actually suboptimal for this particular application. Reynolds clicked to the next slide, which showed side-by-side comparisons of hand sizes and proportions. Smaller hands with higher finger-length to palm ratios allow for more precise individual digit control. A lower center of gravity provides better stability for managing the different recoil patterns. These aren't limitations. They're specialized adaptations for a specific combat function. Olivia studied the faces of the senior officers as they processed this information. Some looked intrigued, others uncomfortable. The military had spent centuries building doctrine around a certain physical ideal for combat troops. The idea that those assumptions might not just be incomplete, but actively counterproductive in some scenarios, was clearly unsettling. "We've begun screening for candidates with similar physical attributes," Hayes added. "Lieutenant Bennett is helping develop a training protocol that will allow us to determine who else might have these capabilities." After the briefing concluded, Olivia found herself approached by General Sandra Martinez, one of the few female flag officers in attendance. "Quite a stir you've caused, Lieutenant," Martinez said with a slight smile. "I'm curious, did you know you could do this before the demonstration at Benning, or was it as much a surprise to you as everyone else?" "I had a theory, ma'am," Olivia admitted. "Growing up, my father noticed I had unusual manual dexterity. I could field strip and reassemble weapons faster than kids twice my size. But the dual operation technique? That was something I'd never tried before that day." Martinez nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes the most significant breakthroughs come when someone with the right attributes encounters the right challenge at the right moment. The trick is creating an environment where those encounters can happen. If I may ask, ma'am, do you think this will actually change anything? Beyond this specific technique, I mean." The general considered the question carefully. "Military institutions don't change easily, Lieutenant. There's always resistance to new ideas, especially ones that challenge fundamental assumptions about who makes an effective warrior. But what you've demonstrated is irrefutable. That's a powerful thing." As Martinez moved away to speak with Colonel Hayes, Olivia felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find Master Sergeant Harper, her former weapons instructor from Fort Benning. "Bennett," he greeted her with a nod. "Looks like you've been busy since qualification." "Master Sergeant," Olivia replied, genuinely pleased to see him. "What brings you to Bragg?" "I've been reassigned to the training cadre for this new program," Harper explained. "Apparently they need someone who's witnessed the Bennett method firsthand." Olivia winced slightly at the name. "I wish they wouldn't call it that." "Too late," Harper chuckled. "It's already entered the lexicon. First Sergeant Donovan sends his regards, by the way. Says he's never been happier to be proven wrong about a candidate." The mention of Donovan brought a smile to Olivia's face. The hard-nosed instructor who had been her most vocal critic had become, surprisingly, one of her strongest advocates after the demonstration. "How are things back at Benning?" she asked. Harper's expression turned serious. "Changed. Your performance caused quite the paradigm shift. We're looking at candidates differently now, evaluating potential based on specialized applications rather than just checking traditional boxes." Before Olivia could respond, Colonel Hayes called the room to attention. "Tomorrow," he announced, "we begin Phase 2 of the Special Capabilities Development Program. Lieutenant Bennett will be leading the first training cohort, focusing on identifying and developing operators capable of implementing the dual system technique. This isn't just about creating a new tactical capability. It's about reshaping how we think about operator specialization." Hayes' eyes found Olivia's across the room. "Lieutenant, these candidates have been pre-screened based on the physical attributes we've identified as optimal for this application. But physical attributes are only part of the equation. We need you to help identify who has the intangible qualities, the spatial awareness, the mental processing speed, the adaptability, to master this technique." Olivia felt a momentary flutter of anxiety. She had spent her entire military career trying to prove she belonged. Now she was being asked to help identify others who shared her unique capabilities, to create an entirely new combat specialization based on attributes that had once been seen as disqualifying. The responsibility was enormous. That evening, in her temporary quarters at Fort Bragg, Olivia reviewed the files of the 20 candidates selected for the initial training cohort. They came from various branches: Army, Marines, Navy, Air Force, and had diverse backgrounds, but all shared certain physical characteristics that matched the profile DARPA had developed based on Olivia's performance. What struck her most was that many had notes in their files indicating struggles with traditional physical requirements, despite exceptional performance in specialized skills. They were, in many ways, reflections of her own experience, capable operators who didn't fit the conventional mold. A knock at her door interrupted her review. She opened it to find Dr. Reynolds holding a tablet computer. "Lieutenant, I apologize for the late intrusion, but there's something you should see before tomorrow's session." Olivia invited him in, and Reynolds placed the tablet on her desk, bringing up a video file. "This is from a classified operation 3 years ago in Somalia," he explained. "I had to get special clearance to access it, but I think it's directly relevant to what we're developing." The video showed helmet cam footage from a special operations team pinned down in an urban environment. The operator wearing the camera was positioned on a rooftop, attempting to provide cover fire with an M4 while simultaneously using a spotter scope to identify targets for a sniper positioned elsewhere. "This was Sergeant David Garcia," Reynolds explained. 5'6", smaller than average hands, exceptional coordination. He was killed 2 years ago in Afghanistan. Olivia watched as Garcia struggled to manage both tasks, eventually abandoning the spotter scope to focus on suppressive fire as the situation deteriorated. If Garcia had been trained in your technique, if he'd had both a saw and a precision rifle instead of trying to use an M4 and a separate optical system, this operation might have had a different outcome, Reynolds said quietly. The implication was clear. What Olivia had demonstrated wasn't just an interesting tactical novelty. It was a capability that could save lives in specific combat scenarios. "I never thought of it that way," Olivia admitted. "That's why tomorrow matters," Reynolds replied. "We're not just creating a new tactic. We're potentially saving lives by matching the right operators with the right capabilities for the right situations." The weight of Reynolds' words stayed with Olivia long after he left. She returned to the candidate files with renewed purpose, studying each one carefully, looking not just at the physical attributes but at the complete picture of each operator's capabilities and experiences. By morning, she had developed a training approach that would not only test the candidate's ability to master the dual system technique, but would help identify who among them had the unique combination of attributes, physical, mental, and psychological, to excel in this specialized role. The training facility at Fort Bragg's classified annex had been specially modified for the program. The main range now featured adjustable shooting platforms that could be configured for operators of various heights and proportions. The weapons themselves, custom variants of the M249 and the D-338 Lapua had been engineered with modular components that could be tailored to each operator's specific needs. As Olivia entered the facility, she found the 20 candidates already assembled. They were an unusual group by military standards, generally smaller in stature than typical special operators, with a higher percentage of women than any combat specialization outside of helicopter pilots. What they shared was less immediately obvious: exceptional fine motor control, superior hand-eye coordination, and cognitive processing speeds that allowed for effective multitasking under pressure. "Good morning," Olivia began, conscious of the curious eyes evaluating her. "I'm Lieutenant Bennett. Some of you may have heard about what we're going to be attempting here. Others may be wondering why you were selected for this program." She paused, scanning the faces before her. Some looked eager, others skeptical, a few openly curious. "Each of you was chosen because you possess physical and cognitive attributes that make you uniquely suited for a specialized combat capability we're developing. This isn't about being better or worse than traditional operators. It's about being different in ways that create tactical advantages in specific scenarios." A hand went up. A compact Marine Corps sergeant with calloused hands and watchful eyes. "Sergeant Lewis, ma'am. Permission to speak freely?" Olivia nodded. "Word is you can operate 2 different weapons systems simultaneously. With respect, that sounds like circus tricks, not combat tactics." Several others nodded in agreement. Olivia had expected this reaction. She'd had the same thought herself when first presented with the concept. "Fair question, Sergeant. Rather than explain, let me demonstrate." Olivia moved to the closest shooting platform, where both weapon systems were already mounted. Without ceremony, she assumed her position, adjusted the weapons to her specifications, and signaled to Master Sergeant Harper to activate the target system. What followed was even more impressive than her original demonstration at Fort Benning. In the intervening months, Olivia had refined her technique, developing greater efficiency in managing both weapons simultaneously. The M249 laid down precise suppressive fire across designated zones, while the Lapua eliminated specific high-value targets at extreme ranges, all controlled by a single operator with unnervingly precise coordination. When she finished and stood up, the room was silent. "That's not a circus trick," Olivia said quietly. "That's a capability that could mean the difference between mission success and failure in scenarios where we can only insert minimal personnel but need both area suppression and precision elimination." Lewis nodded slowly, his skepticism replaced by cautious interest. "How long did it take you to learn that, ma'am?" "I discovered I could do it during a qualification exercise," Olivia explained. "But I've spent the past 3 months refining the technique. What we're going to determine here is whether this is a specialized skill that can be taught, or if it requires innate attributes that only some operators possess." Another candidate, an Air Force combat controller named Rodriguez, raised her hand. "And if we can't do it? What then?" "Then we've learned something valuable about the parameters of this capability," Olivia replied honestly. "There's no failure here, only data. Every operator has different strengths. The purpose of this program isn't to make everyone capable of dual system operation. It's to identify who has this specific capability and develop protocols to deploy it effectively." The training began with basic familiarity exercises for each weapon system individually. Olivia wanted to establish each candidate's baseline proficiency before attempting to integrate the systems. Harper moved through the group, making minor adjustments to stance and grip, while Dr. Reynolds observed and took notes on a tablet. By midday, clear patterns were emerging. Roughly half the candidates showed the exceptional weapon control necessary for the next phase. The others, while skilled operators, lacked either the specific motor control or the cognitive processing capacity to effectively manage multiple complex tasks simultaneously. Olivia gathered the group after lunch. "Based on this morning's assessment, we're going to divide into 2 groups. Group Alpha will begin integration training with both weapon systems. Group Bravo will focus on identifying other specialized applications where your unique attributes might create tactical advantages." She was careful to frame this not as success versus failure, but as different pathways based on individual capabilities. This wasn't about creating an elite within the elite. It was about matching specialized operators to specialized functions. The candidates assigned to Group Alpha approached the dual system platforms with varying degrees of confidence. Olivia worked with each one individually, guiding them through the fundamental principles of simultaneous operation. "The key," she explained to Marine Corps Lance Corporal Diane Foster, who showed particular promise, "is to mentally separate your awareness of each weapon system while maintaining overall situational integration. Your right side controls the SAW, focusing on area targets. Your left side manages the precision rifle, engaging specific points, but your mind has to process both information streams simultaneously." Foster nodded, her small hands adjusting naturally to the controls. "Like playing piano with different patterns in each hand?" Olivia smiled. "Exactly like that. Did you play?" "Since I was 5, Foster confirmed. "Teacher said I had unusually independent hand coordination. Never thought it would be relevant to combat operations." "That's exactly the kind of background experience we're looking for," Olivia encouraged her. "Try a test sequence." Foster settled into position, her breathing steady as she prepared to engage the target system. When Harper activated the program, Foster's performance was remarkable. Not as refined as Olivia's, but showing clear capability for the dual system approach. "Outstanding, Lance Corporal," Olivia said when Foster completed the sequence. "You're a natural for this application." As the day progressed, 3 other candidates in Group Alpha demonstrated similar aptitude. Sergeant Lewis, despite his initial skepticism, showed exceptional potential once he grasped the fundamental mechanics. Air Force Staff Sergeant Jennifer Reyes displayed almost intuitive understanding of the ballistic relationships between the 2 systems. And Army Specialist Malik Johnson, a former competitive shooter with unusually dexterous hands, adapted to the technique with surprising speed. In Group Bravo, Dr. Reynolds was leading exercises to identify other specialized applications where their unique physical attributes might create advantages. One promising direction involved close-quarters precision work, where smaller operators could maintain exceptional accuracy in confined spaces that would restrict larger individuals. By the end of the first day, Olivia felt a sense of accomplishment that transcended anything she'd experienced in her military career. She wasn't just performing a specialized function herself. She was helping identify and develop others with similar capabilities, creating an entirely new combat specialization based on attributes that had once been considered limitations. Colonel Hayes observed the final hour of training, his expression thoughtful as he watched the candidates work through their exercises. "Impressive progress, Lieutenant," he commented as Olivia joined him at the observation position. "Particularly Foster and Lewis. They have the physical attributes we identified, sir, but more importantly, they have the cognitive flexibility to adapt to the technique," Olivia explained. "It's not just about hand size or coordination. It's about how their brains process parallel tasks." Hayes nodded, "Which makes me wonder what other specialized capabilities we've been overlooking because we've been so focused on standardized physical ideals. If I may ask, sir, what's the ultimate goal here? Beyond developing this specific technique?" Hayes considered the question carefully before answering. "The battlefield is evolving, Lieutenant. Asymmetric threats, urban environments, constraints on force size and footprint, all these factors demand new approaches to combat operations. What you've demonstrated is that specialized physical attributes can create unique tactical advantages in specific scenarios." He gestured toward the training floor, where Foster was working through another sequence. "We're not just developing a new technique. We're potentially redefining how we think about combat effectiveness itself." That evening, Olivia met with Harper and Reynolds to review the day's results and plan the next phase of training. The data was promising. 8 of the 20 candidates showed clear potential for mastering the dual system technique, with 4 demonstrating exceptional aptitude. "We need to develop a formalized assessment protocol," Reynolds suggested, scrolling through performance metrics on his tablet. "Something that can be implemented at selection to identify candidates with these specific capabilities." Harper nodded in agreement. "And a specialized training pipeline. This isn't something we can just incorporate into existing programs. It requires a fundamentally different approach." "What about deployment concepts?" Olivia asked. "How do we envision actually using this capability operationally?" Reynolds pulled up a series of tactical scenarios on his display. "We've been modeling several applications. The most promising involve overwatch positions where a single operator can provide both area denial and precision targeting. Particularly useful in urban environments or situations where we need to limit our footprint but maximize capabilities." The discussion continued late into the night, with the 3 of them mapping out not just a training program but an entire operational concept built around the specialized capabilities they were developing. What had begun as a demonstration of an unusual skill was evolving into something far more significant, a reconsideration of fundamental assumptions about combat effectiveness and operator specialization. As Olivia finally returned to her quarters, she found a message waiting on her secure tablet, a briefing notification for 0800 the next morning. The subject line read simply, "Operation Dexterous Sentinel, Concept Approval." The implications were clear. This wasn't just a training exercise or a theoretical development program anymore. The capability she had demonstrated was being fast-tracked for operational deployment. Olivia felt a complex mixture of pride and apprehension. The technique she had pioneered, the capability that had transformed her supposed limitations into unique advantages, was about to be tested in real-world conditions. The stakes had just increased exponentially. She pulled up the preliminary briefing materials, scanning quickly through the operational concept. The scenario involved a hostage situation in a dense urban environment where conventional approaches would be compromised by space constraints and civilian presence. The dual system capability would allow for both precise elimination of hostile forces and area control with minimal operator footprint. It was exactly the kind of scenario where her specialized skills would create decisive advantages. But it was also a scenario where lives would depend on those skills performing flawlessly under extreme pressure. Olivia closed the briefing documents and moved to the window of her quarters, looking out at the lights of Fort Bragg in the distance. 3 months ago, she had been fighting to prove she belonged in an elite combat qualification program. Now she was helping redefine how the military thought about combat effectiveness itself. The journey from being mocked for her small hands to pioneering a technique that leveraged those same hands as a tactical advantage had been shorter than anyone could have imagined. But the true test still lay ahead. proving that this capability could make a difference where it mattered most, in the field, under fire, with lives on the line. As she prepared for bed, Olivia's thoughts returned to a conversation she'd had with Lance Corporal Foster earlier that day. "I spent my whole career trying to compensate for being smaller than everyone else," Foster had confided. "Lifting more, running faster, doing everything I could to prove I belonged. I never once considered that being smaller might actually be an advantage in some situations." "That's the thing about assumptions," Olivia had replied, echoing General Martinez's words from earlier. "They limit both the people making them and the people they're made about." Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new doubts to overcome, new barriers to break. But Olivia Bennett was no longer fighting to prove she belonged. She was helping create a place where others like her could discover their own unique contributions to the mission, a place where different wasn't lesser, just specialized for different applications. The military had spent centuries building doctrine around a specific physical ideal. Changing that wouldn't happen overnight. But every revolution began with a single breakthrough, a moment when someone demonstrated that what everyone knew to be true wasn't the whole picture. For Olivia, that moment had come when she first operated two weapon systems simultaneously, with hands that everyone had assumed were too small for effective combat operations. For others, similar moments would come as they discovered their own unique capabilities. The revolution wasn't about replacing traditional operators or invalidating conventional approaches. It was about expanding the definition of combat effectiveness to include specialized capabilities that created advantages in specific scenarios, about recognizing that diversity in physical attributes could be a tactical asset rather than a limitation to be overcome. As she drifted towards sleep, Olivia's last thought was of those hands that had been mocked and dismissed, the hands that had changed military doctrine and created a new path for operators who didn't fit the conventional mold. The hands that had transformed a perceived weakness into a revolutionary strength. 5 years later, Captain Olivia Bennett, now Major Bennett, stood at the observation window overlooking Special Capability Group Alpha's advanced training facility at Fort Bragg. Below, 24 operators moved through a complex urban warfare simulation, each one demonstrating capabilities that would have been considered impossible half a decade earlier. "Still hard to believe sometimes, isn't it?" asked Colonel Grace Martinez, formerly General Martinez, who had retired from active duty to lead the Pentagon's Special Capability Development Program. "That we went from, 'those hands are too small,' to an entire operational doctrine built around specialized attributes?" Olivia smiled. "Every day." In the 5 years since Operation Dexterous Sentinel, Special Capability Group Alpha had evolved from an experimental unit into one of the military's most innovative and effective special operations forces. What had begun with Olivia's dual weapon technique had expanded into a comprehensive approach to operator specialization, identifying and developing unique capabilities based on specific physical and cognitive attributes. "The Secretary of Defense is impressed with the latest deployment statistics," Martinez noted, handing Olivia a tablet displaying mission effectiveness data. 93% success rate in designated scenario types, with casualty rates 70% lower than conventional approaches. Olivia scrolled through the data with quiet satisfaction. The success isn't in the technology, or even the techniques. It's in the paradigm shift, recognizing that different physical attributes optimize for different tactical applications. "Speaking of paradigm shifts," Martinez said, "the integration program with conventional forces has exceeded all expectations. Commander Walker's team has become our strongest advocates." The mention of Walker brought a smile to Olivia's face. The SEAL commander, who had initially viewed her team with such skepticism, had become one of their most vocal supporters, helping bridge the gap between conventional special operations and the specialized capabilities Olivia's group had pioneered. He understood something fundamental, Olivia reflected. This was never about replacing conventional capabilities. It's about expanding our tactical options by recognizing that different physical attributes create different advantages in specific scenarios. Below them, Lance Corporal Foster, now Captain Foster, was leading a group through an advanced version of the dual system technique that allowed for even greater mobility in confined spaces. Foster had been with the program from the beginning, one of the original 4 operators who had deployed on Operation Dexterous Sentinel. "The USAF Chief of Staff is visiting next week," Martinez mentioned. "She's particularly interested in how we're integrating these capabilities into air combat rescue operations." Olivia nodded. Sergeant Reyes has been leading that initiative. The applications for personnel recovery in denied environments are particularly promising. As they watched the training exercise below, Olivia reflected on how far they had come in 5 years. What had begun as a single specialized technique had blossomed into dozens of innovative capabilities, each leveraging physical attributes that had once been seen as limitations. Operators with smaller frames could navigate confined spaces that would be inaccessible to larger individuals. Those with exceptional manual dexterity could manage complex technical tasks under extreme pressure. Lower centers of gravity created advantages in certain movement techniques and weapons applications. The recruiting pipeline is yielding remarkable results, Martinez observed. We're identifying potential operators who would never have been considered under conventional selection criteria. Because we're looking for different attributes, Olivia agreed. Not better or worse, just optimized for different applications. The revolution hadn't been without resistance. Traditional military culture, built around standardized physical ideals, hadn't changed overnight. There were still those who viewed Special Capability Group Alpha with skepticism or even derision, but the results were undeniable. In scenario after scenario, the specialized capabilities Olivia's unit had developed had created tactical options that conventional approaches couldn't match. Lives had been saved, missions accomplished, objectives secured, all because they had expanded their understanding of what made an effective operator. "The Secretary wants you in Washington next month," Martinez said as they left the observation area. "The Joint Chiefs are finalizing the 10-year strategic plan for special operations capability development. Your input is considered essential." Olivia raised an eyebrow. From mockery to essential in 5 years. That's quite a journey. It's what happens when you transform a perceived limitation into a revolutionary advantage, Martinez replied with a knowing smile. "Speaking of which, there's someone waiting to see you in your office." Olivia entered her office to find Master Sergeant, now Command Sergeant Major, Harper sitting comfortably in one of her visitor chairs. The gruff instructor who had witnessed her first demonstration of the dual-system technique had become both a trusted advisor and a vital link to conventional special operations communities. "Harper," Olivia greeted him warmly. "I thought you were in Germany with the NATO integration team." "Got back yesterday," Harper replied, rising to his feet. "And brought something you should see." He placed a tablet on her desk, displaying footage from what appeared to be a hostage rescue operation in an urban environment. Olivia recognized the tactical signatures immediately, operators using variants of the capabilities her unit had pioneered, seamlessly integrated with conventional special operations elements. "German KSK and French GIGN," Harper explained. "Using our protocols, with operators selected and trained based on our specialized attribute identification process." Olivia watched with professional satisfaction as the operation unfolded with precision efficiency. The dual-system technique she had first demonstrated at Fort Benning was now being employed by elite units around the world, saving lives in scenarios that would have once been considered nearly impossible to resolve without casualties. 5 years ago, they were calling this the American experiment, Harper remarked. Now it's becoming standard doctrine for specialized scenarios across NATO. "It was never about being American," Olivia replied. "It was about recognizing that human diversity is a tactical asset, not a limitation to be overcome." Harper nodded in agreement. "Speaking of which, I've been meaning to ask, have you seen Donovan lately?" First Sergeant Donovan, the instructor who had initially been Olivia's most vocal critic, had retired 2 years earlier, but not before becoming one of the program's strongest advocates within traditional special operations training circles. "He spoke at our advanced course graduation last month," Olivia replied. "Still intimidating the hell out of recruits, but now he's telling them not to make the same mistake he did, assuming that there's only one physical profile for an effective operator." Harper chuckled. "Never thought I'd see the day when Michael Donovan admitted he was wrong about anything." "He wasn't entirely wrong," Olivia said thoughtfully. "The physical attributes he valued really do optimize for certain mission types. His mistake was in not recognizing that different attributes optimize for different applications." After Harper departed, Olivia reviewed the day's operational reports. Special Capability Group Alpha now maintained 5 permanent operational teams, each specializing in different scenario types, where their unique capabilities created decisive advantages. The unit had conducted over 70 successful missions since its formal establishment, ranging from hostage rescues to high-value target acquisitions in environments that conventional forces found particularly challenging. But perhaps more significant than the operational success was the cultural shift the unit had helped catalyze within the broader special operations community. The idea that different physical attributes created different tactical advantages was no longer radical. It was becoming foundational to how the military approached operator selection and specialization. A knock at her door interrupted her review. Lieutenant Grace Chen, one of the unit's newest officers, entered with a tablet in hand. "Major Bennett, we've received a priority tasking from CENTCOM," Chen reported. "Potential hostage situation developing in Lebanon. Initial assessment suggests conventional approaches are compromised by environmental constraints." Olivia reviewed the preliminary data with practiced efficiency. The scenario involved an American aid worker being held in Beirut's densely packed southern suburbs, an urban environment with narrow passages, multiple levels, and complex sightlines. "Assemble the planning team," she instructed, "and notify Captain Foster's unit for potential deployment. This scenario aligns with their specialized capabilities." As Chen departed to implement these instructions, Olivia found herself reflecting on how routine such operations had become. 5 years ago, the deployment of specialized operators selected for physical attributes that differed from conventional ideals would have been considered experimental and high risk. Now it was standard procedure for specific scenario types. The planning session that followed demonstrated how far they had come in developing integrated operational protocols. Intelligence analysts, mission planners, equipment specialists, and operators worked with seamless coordination to develop a comprehensive approach that leveraged their unique capabilities while mitigating potential vulnerabilities. "The primary challenge is the structural density," Captain Foster explained, highlighting specific areas on the three-dimensional rendering of the target location. "Conventional breach and clear approaches would alert hostiles before we could establish effective control positions." "Agreed," Olivia confirmed. "This is exactly the scenario type where our capabilities create decisive advantages. I want 3 dual-system operators in Overwatch positions here, here, and here. Team 2 will handle the actual extraction once the precision elimination elements are in place." The planning continued with methodical efficiency, each element of the operation designed to leverage the specialized capabilities they had developed. By the time they concluded, they had established a comprehensive approach that offered significantly higher success probability than conventional alternatives. "Captain Foster," Olivia said as the team prepared to implement the operational plan. "A moment." Foster remained behind as the others departed. Like Olivia, she had been part of the program from the beginning, one of the original 4 operators who had deployed on Operation Dexterous Sentinel. Now she commanded her own specialized team, having refined and expanded upon the capabilities Olivia had pioneered. "This will be your 7th independent command," Olivia noted. "How are you feeling about it?" Foster considered the question thoughtfully. Confident in the capability, the team, and the approach, but never complacent. "Every operation has its unique challenges." "Good answer," Olivia approved. "Remember the fundamental principle. Different isn't lesser, just specialized for different applications," Foster completed with a smile. "You've only told us that about 1,000 times, ma'am, and I'll probably tell you 1,000 more," Olivia replied. "Because it's the foundation of everything we do." As Foster departed to prepare her team for deployment, Olivia reflected on how the younger officer embodied the transformation they had helped create. 5 years ago, Foster had been a Marine Corps Lance Corporal, struggling to be taken seriously in a system that viewed her physical attributes as limitations. Now she commanded a specialized operational team, leading missions that leveraged those same attributes as tactical advantages. The operation that followed unfolded with textbook precision. Foster's team inserted into Beirut under cover of darkness, establishing Overwatch positions using the advanced dual-system technique to provide both precision elimination of identified threats and area suppression of potential reinforcement corridors. Olivia monitored the operation from the command center at Fort Bragg, observing with professional satisfaction as the capabilities they had developed created options that wouldn't have existed using conventional approaches. The extraction was completed without casualties, with the American aid worker rescued and all operators safely withdrawn before local forces could respond effectively. Another successful demonstration of specialized capability advantages, Colonel Hayes remarked as they concluded the operational debrief. The secretary will be pleased. The real success is in the normalization, Olivia replied. 5 years ago, this would have been considered an exceptional operation. Now it's becoming standard procedure for specific scenario types. Hayes nodded in agreement. That's how paradigm shifts happen. Not all at once, but gradually, as new approaches demonstrate their effectiveness until they become the new normal. Later that evening, Olivia found herself in a video conference with an unlikely group. The original skeptics who had witnessed her first demonstration of the dual system technique at Fort Benning. First Sergeant Donovan, now retired, Master Sergeant Harper, now Command Sergeant Major, and James Ramirez, now a captain commanding his own conventional special operations team, had gathered virtually to commemorate the 5-year anniversary of the program's inception. I still remember the look on Donovan's face when you operated both weapons simultaneously for the first time, Ramirez laughed. I thought he was going to have a stroke. In my defense, Donovan replied good-naturedly, it violated everything we thought we knew about operator capabilities. Those hands looked like they belonged on a piano, not managing 2 different weapon systems simultaneously. And yet here we are, Harper observed, with an entire operational doctrine built around the capabilities those hands pioneered. Olivia smiled at the friendly banter, remembering how far they had all come from those early days of skepticism and doubt. The real question, Ramirez said more seriously, is what comes next? Where do you see this going in another 5 years, Olivia? It was a question Olivia had been considering deeply as the program evolved from experimental concept to established capability. Integration, she replied after a thoughtful pause. Not just of specialized and conventional capabilities, but of our fundamental understanding of combat effectiveness. Moving beyond the idea that there's a single ideal operator profile toward a more nuanced approach that recognizes different physical and cognitive attributes create different tactical advantages in different scenarios. Specialized teams for specialized applications. Donovan nodded. Makes sense. But won't that create fragmentation issues? Too many specialized capabilities might compromise overall force cohesion. That's why integration is the key, Olivia explained. Not separating specialized and conventional capabilities, but developing frameworks where they function as complementary elements of a comprehensive approach. The conversation continued late into the evening, ranging from operational details to broader philosophical questions about the future of special operations. What had begun as a skeptical assessment of an unusual capability had evolved into a thoughtful discussion among professionals committed to advancing their craft. As the call concluded, Donovan had the final word. I was wrong about you, Bennett, he admitted with characteristic bluntness. And I've never been happier to be wrong about anything in my life. What you've built over these past 5 years isn't just changing how we conduct operations. It's changing how we think about human capability itself. The following morning brought Olivia to Washington, D.C., where she had been summoned to brief the National Security Council on the implications of the specialized capabilities her unit had developed. As she prepared in her hotel room, she received a message from an unexpected source, the young recruit she had noticed 5 years earlier, who had reminded her so much of herself when she first arrived at Fort Benning. That recruit, Alicia Hernandez, was now a lieutenant commanding her own specialized team within Special Capability Group Alpha. Her message was simple but profound. Just wanted to say thank you, ma'am. Not just for what you built, but for showing people like me that our differences aren't limitations. They're specialized advantages waiting to be discovered. The message affected Olivia more deeply than she had expected. In the daily demands of building and leading an innovative unit, it was easy to lose sight of the broader impact their work was having, not just on operational effectiveness, but on the lives and careers of individuals who would have been marginalized under the old paradigm. The briefing to the National Security Council was scheduled for 0900 in the Situation Room of the White House. As Olivia entered the secure facility, she found herself facing the nation's senior military and civilian leadership, individuals responsible for shaping America's security strategy for decades to come. Major Bennett, the Secretary of Defense began, we've asked you here today to help us understand the broader implications of the specialized capabilities your unit has developed. The operational success is well documented, but we're interested in your assessment of how these approaches might influence our overall force development strategy moving forward. Olivia took a moment to collect her thoughts before responding. This wasn't just about technical capabilities or tactical advantages. It was about a fundamental reassessment of how the military identified, developed, and deployed human potential. "Mr. Secretary, distinguished members of the Council," she began. "What began 5 years ago as an experimental approach to specific operational challenges has evolved into something far more significant, a reconsideration of our basic assumptions about combat effectiveness and operator specialization." She brought up data showing the performance metrics of Special Capability Group Alpha compared to conventional approaches in specific scenario types, highlighting the dramatic differences in success rates and casualty reduction. The traditional approach to operator selection and development is built around standardized physical ideals that optimize for certain mission types, she explained. What we've demonstrated is that different physical attributes optimize for different tactical applications. By expanding our understanding of combat effectiveness to include these specialized capabilities, we've created options that simply didn't exist previously. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs leaned forward. "The question, Major, is whether this represents a niche capability for specific scenarios, or a broader shift in how we should approach force development overall." "Both, sir," Olivia replied without hesitation. The specialized capabilities themselves are indeed optimized for specific scenario types, but the underlying principle that different physical and cognitive attributes create different tactical advantages in different contexts has implications for how we select, train, and deploy operators across the entire force structure. The briefing continued for nearly 2 hours, with Olivia fielding questions about everything from selection methodologies to integration protocols to future capability development. Throughout, she emphasized that the revolution wasn't in the specific techniques, but in the paradigm shift they represented, moving from a standardized ideal toward a more nuanced understanding of human capability and combat effectiveness. As the briefing concluded, the President himself asked the final question. "Major Bennett, if you could distill what you've learned over these past 5 years into a single insight that should guide our approach moving forward, what would it be?" Olivia considered the question carefully, aware of its significance. "Mr. President, I believe the key insight is that human diversity is a tactical asset, not a limitation to be overcome or an accommodation to be made. Different physical and cognitive attributes create different capabilities that optimize for different applications. By recognizing and developing these specialized advantages rather than trying to force everyone into a standardized ideal, we create options that wouldn't otherwise exist. Options that save lives and accomplish missions in scenarios that would otherwise be compromised." The President nodded thoughtfully. "That's a perspective with implications far beyond military applications, Major. Thank you for your insight and your service." As Olivia departed the White House, she found Colonel Hayes waiting beside a black SUV on Pennsylvania Avenue. "How did it go?" he asked as they settled into the vehicle. "Better than expected," Olivia replied. "I think they genuinely understand that this isn't just about a specific capability or tactical approach. It's about a fundamental reassessment of how we identify and develop human potential." Hayes nodded in satisfaction. "That's been your contribution from the beginning, seeing beyond the immediate tactical application to the broader implications for how we think about combat effectiveness." As they drove through Washington toward the Pentagon, Olivia found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. From being mocked for her small hands to briefing the National Security Council on capabilities those same hands had pioneered, it was a transformation that extended far beyond personal vindication. The true significance lay in what it meant for others, operators whose physical attributes had once been seen as limitations rather than specializations. The success of Special Capability Group Alpha had created space for a more nuanced understanding of combat effectiveness, one that recognized the tactical advantages of specialized attributes in specific scenarios. At the Pentagon, Olivia was surprised to find a formal ceremony had been arranged in one of the secure briefing areas. Colonel Hayes led her into a room filled with senior officers from across the Special Operations community, along with representatives from the specialized unit she had helped create. General Richards, the commander of U.S. Special Operations Command, stepped forward. "Major Bennett, in recognition of your contributions to Special Operations capability development and your pioneering work in operator specialization protocols, it is my privilege to inform you of your promotion to Lieutenant Colonel, effective immediately." The announcement caught Olivia genuinely by surprise. She had been so focused on building the capability that she had given little thought to her own career progression. As General Richards pinned the new rank insignia to her uniform, he spoke quietly, so only she could hear. 5 years ago, I was among those who questioned whether your approach represented a viable operational capability or just an interesting novelty. I've never been happier to be proven wrong. The ceremony that followed was brief but meaningful, with representatives from each of the specialized units sharing operational outcomes that would have been impossible without the capabilities Olivia had helped develop. Lives saved, missions accomplished, objectives secured, all because they had expanded their understanding of what made an effective operator. Captain Foster spoke last, representing the original operators who had deployed on Operation Dexterous Sentinel. "Colonel Bennett taught us something essential," she said, addressing the assembled group. "That our differences aren't limitations to be overcome. They're specialized advantages waiting to be discovered. That lesson has not only changed how we conduct operations, but how we think about human capability itself." As the ceremony concluded and the group dispersed, Olivia found herself standing beside the display case that had been installed in the Pentagon's Special Operations Wing. Inside were artifacts from significant milestones in special operations history, including the modified weapons from Operation Dexterous Sentinel, the first operational deployment of the dual system technique. A small plaque beneath the display read simply, "Sometimes the greatest strengths hide in what others perceive as limitations." Colonel Hayes joined her at the display. "They'll be studying what you started for generations to come," he observed. "Not just the tactical innovations, but the paradigm shift in how we think about combat effectiveness." "It was never about me," Olivia replied. "It was about creating space for a more nuanced understanding of human capability, recognizing that different physical attributes create different tactical advantages in different scenarios." "Perhaps," Hayes conceded, "but it took your hands to demonstrate what was possible, to transform a perceived limitation into a revolutionary advantage." As they walked together toward the Pentagon's main entrance, Olivia found herself thinking about that first day at Fort Benning, when First Sergeant Donovan had looked at her hands with such skepticism. "Those tiny hands won't be able to control that beast," he had said, referring to the M249. Now those same hands had not only controlled the M249, but had operated it simultaneously with a precision rifle, creating a capability that had saved American lives in scenarios where conventional approaches would have failed. More significantly, they had helped catalyze a fundamental reassessment of how the military identified and developed human potential. The journey from mockery to validation had been remarkable, but the true victory wasn't personal. It was institutional, a paradigm shift that had created opportunities for countless others, whose unique attributes had previously been overlooked or undervalued. As Lieutenant Colonel Olivia Bennett stepped into the bright Washington sunshine, she knew that the revolution she had helped start was still in its early stages. The full implications of recognizing that different physical attributes created different tactical advantages would continue to unfold for years to come, reshaping not just how the military conducted operations, but how it thought about human capability itself. Sometimes the greatest innovations came not from playing to established strengths, but from discovering the hidden advantages in what everyone else considered limitations. Sometimes the very thing that made you different was exactly what made you invaluable. And sometimes it took small hands to make the biggest impact. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.